All right, so what's going on, everybody? It's been a while since I've done a Google Hangout on True Talk TV. Today, I want to talk about some issues that have been brought up recently over the Johnson Amendment and separation of church and state. How I'm going to go about this video actually is I'm going to share a video that I found from Donald Trump as he was explaining his new goal to remove this actual violation of the Establishment Clause, or better, the First Amendment. So I'm going to screen share this, guys. We'll listen to what Donald Trump has to say, and then I'm going to play a second video to break down the history of the Johnson Amendment, for those that don't know what it is, and then I'm going to explain why it really is a violation of separation of church and state. So then I'll take some comments from the audience, and we'll see what you guys have to say on this. So here's the video. It's relatively short. It's only about 5 minutes long. So let's take a listen, guys.
Eternal truth. Freedom is not a gift from government. Freedom is a gift from God. It was Thomas Jefferson who said, "The God who gave us life gave us liberty." Our founding fathers believed that religious liberty was so fundamental that they enshrined it in the very First Amendment of our great and beloved Constitution. Yet for too long, the federal government has used the power of the state as a weapon against people of faith, bullying and even punishing Americans for following their religious beliefs. It's been happening. That is why I am signing today an executive order to defend the freedom of religion and speech in America, the freedoms that we've wanted, the freedoms that you fought for so long, and we are doing it in just a little while right over here. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. No American should be forced to choose between the dictates of the federal government and the tenets of their faith. As I campaigned across the country, faith leaders explained that they were prevented from speaking their minds because of a 1954 rule known as the Johnson Amendment. I spoke about it a lot. Under this rule, if a pastor, priest, or imam speaks about issues of public or political importance, they are threatened with the loss of their tax-exempt status, a crippling financial punishment. Very, very unfair. But no longer. I promised to take action if I won. I didn't win. I gave you no promise, that's for sure. If I didn't win, I guess I'd be gone, right? I'd be out enjoying my life, I think. But I wouldn't be helping you with the Johnson Amendment. And to this end, this financial threat against the faith community is over. In just a few moments, I will be signing an executive order to follow through on that pledge and to prevent the Johnson Amendment from interfering with your First Amendment rights. And you're the people I want to listen to. Other people are allowed to tell me and everybody what to do. I want to hear it from you. And so do a lot of other people. So you're now in a position where you can say what you want to say. And I know you'll only say good, and you'll say what's in your heart.
So we've heard enough of what Donald Trump has to say on the issue. Now we're going to do a real quick video. We're going to play a real quick video explaining what the Johnson Amendment is before we get into this. Okay, guys? So we'll move over here. Johnson Amendment. Take a listen, guys.
For almost the first 200 years of American history, Pastors spoke freely and boldly from their pulpits about the issues of the day. Pastors preached election sermons, giving instruction to newly elected officials on what Scripture said about the issues confronting government. Pastors also frequently supported or opposed candidates from their pulpits, going as far back as the presidential election of 1800 and continuing through successive elections. But all that changed in 1954 with the passage of the Johnson Amendment, which effectively overturned almost 200 years of church history in America. To understand the history of the Johnson Amendment, you need to know the circumstances behind the 1954 U.S. senatorial race. In 1954, Lyndon B. Johnson, a powerful Texas politician, was running for re-election to the U.S. Senate. Johnson's opponent was Dudley Dougherty, a 30-year-old first-term state senator from Beeville, Texas. Dougherty was not going to present much of a problem for Johnson, and Johnson felt that he would easily win re-election. That is, until two very powerful men impacted the race through the nonprofit organizations they had created. One man was H.L. Hunt, a Texas oil man, and the other was Frank Gannett, the publishing mogul. Hunt created a nonprofit organization called Fax Forum in 1951. Gannett created a nonprofit organization called the Committee for Constitutional Government in 1935. Both of these organizations were anti-communist, and both were supporting Dougherty in his race against Johnson. Hunt and Gannett believed that Johnson was soft on communism and did not want to see him reelected to the Senate. These two nonprofit organizations passed out thousands of pieces of literature in opposition to Johnson's campaign. Now, when Johnson saw that his chances for reelection were in danger, he tried to find ways of silencing them. He inquired with the Texas Election Commission and even with the IRS whether these groups were violating any law. Johnson was told that these groups were not breaking any laws. In the midst of the campaign, he finally hit on an idea to muzzle these organizations who were opposing his chances for re-election. He showed up on the floor of the Senate on July 2nd, 1954, and offered an amendment to a pending tax overhaul bill. This was a massive bill to modernize the tax code. The legislative history on that day shows that Johnson offered his amendment and declared that the sponsor of the tax bill had agreed to it. The amendment passed by a unanimous voice vote. The bill was passed, and President Eisenhower signed it into law on August 16, 1954. There were no committee hearings on the bill, no legislative analysis, and no attempt to understand the effect this bill might have on the constitutional right of churches and pastors. Johnson's chief aide at the time, a man named George Reedy, was interviewed many years after the fact and stated that Johnson never had churches in mind when he proposed this amendment. One scholar who studied this extensively concluded that the Johnson Amendment is not rooted in constitutional provisions for separation of church and state. Johnson was not trying to address any constitutional issue related to separation of church and state, and he did not offer the amendment because of anything that churches had done. Churches were not banned from endorsing candidates because they are religious organizations. They were banned because they have the same tax-exempt status as Fax Forum and the Committee for Constitutional Government, the right-wing organizations that Johnson was really after. Never let anyone tell you that the Johnson Amendment is intended to protect the so-called separation of church and state. Nothing could be further from the truth. This law was a revenge-motivated law passed by a powerful senator who knew how to use the political process to silence his opponents. You can find out more information about the Johnson Amendment and what Alliance Defending Freedom is doing to combat this unconstitutional restriction at pulpitfreedom.org.
Okay, so I think that a good place for us to start here is actually to let's sort out what the First Amendment is to begin with. Okay, because this is what the biggest misunderstanding is of separation of church and state. So okay, get the First Amendment up here so that I can show you guys. Okay, put this back on screen share. Okay, so the First Amendment of the Constitution says, Congress shall make no law, zoom in. Congress shall make no law. I want you to notice where the prohibiting is coming from or aimed towards. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of press, or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the governments for a redress of grievances. Just like Trump was saying earlier, a lot of secular organizations or a lot of people in government use this Johnson amendment as a way to attack people's religious freedom. And things like this have actually been happening throughout the last 60 or 70 years in America. This idea of the Establishment Clause, for example, it isn't historically accurate when we're speaking of American history. If you look at American history, for example, people say that the Establishment Clause, the First Amendment, prohibits government officials or people to pray in schools, or for the government to promote or to participate in the activities of religion. The problem is that if you look at American history, out of the 55 members who wrote the Constitution, 53 of them were devout Christians. The guy who oversaw these 55 members who put together the Constitution was George Washington, who was a very active, God-believing Christian. He had his problems with the church, obviously, but he was a God-believing, God-fearing man. And George Washington, about 11 years after the Constitution was ratified and put together, George Washington himself used federal money and federal property to actually run churches, to use what we would consider the military at that time to actually participate in choir practices and so on. Many of the other founding fathers actually used federal money to help build churches for some of the Native American tribes. So a lot of this activity was going on by the founding fathers. So it makes sense when you look at what the Constitution, what the First Amendment is actually saying. Notice it again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or press, or of the rights of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Everything is restricting what the government can do. What the First Amendment is here for is not to prohibit religion, but to keep the government from interfering in the activity of God-believing people, so that things didn't turn out the way that they were in England at the time. So basically what you have going on here is the last 60 or 70 years, the First Amendment has been reinterpreted to better fit the agenda of these secular organizations. Historically, it's inaccurate and it's incorrect. Now, I can anticipate a lot of different responses that these secular organizations would bring up. For example, the Treaty of AAA, there's a statement in there where it says we are not a Christian nation, and they stop reading there. But if you continue reading it, it says that we are not a Christian nation, as it has an inherent hostility towards the Muslim men. So it's not saying we're not a Christian nation, but it's saying we're not a Christian nation that has an hostility towards the Muslim religion, towards Muslim beliefs, because there was some conflicts going around in Europe at that time. So basically, all they were saying was, we're not like these people over here that you have beef with. And it all makes sense. The reality of the situation is that all this is really, and the Johnson Law, all it's being used for is a tool for secular organizations to fight against religious people. You see, a lot of these atheists and these secularists, they understand that they're small in numbers, so they have to use deceptive tactics like this to mislead the public. And unfortunately, the majority of the American public don't understand these things. I mean, there was a book, a textbook, an American history textbook in America that was actually being passed. And this was a few years ago when I saw this. But the Second Amendment was actually rewritten as well, where it talks about the right to bear arms. Specifically, what it says is that a well-regulated militia is necessary for a free state. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. That's specifically, word for word, what the Second Amendment says. That's what it's for. A well-regulated militia is necessary for a free state. But in the textbook, they're presenting it to the kids in order to lead them to believe that the Second Amendment was there for hunting. Well, obviously, that's not what it's for. And if you listen to the way that a lot of these anti-gun people speak, well, we have no purpose for the Second Amendment. We don't need it because, it's a different time and blah, blah, blah. So they're using a lot of the same language in the textbook. So you can see what they're trying to do. They slowly, as time goes on, they reinterpret things, they rewrite things. And because they've changed history, the new generation of Americans, they don't understand this stuff. So this is basically what we're dealing with here. That's why I love what Trump is doing. Trump is taking away a tool that dishonest secularists have used for a long time to attack religion. And I think it's an awesome thing. So I'm going to go back over here to the comments and see if there's any activity in the comments section. I know that probably some other people got something to say over this. Go back over here to the comments. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of activity, guys. It's not a whole lot of activity here. And I apologize if it sounds like my voice is giving out. I'm actually very, very sick right now. I have a flu, a bit of a scratchy throat as well. But I'm going to end the hangout soon. So if there's no activity in the comment section, I just wanted to give my opinion on this. I've talked about this for a while actually already, and I think it's actually a very important topic because, look, I mean, there was even an organization in Costa Mesa, California, where they put up a billboard trying to lead people to believe that the founding fathers were against the Bible, and that's obviously nonsense because the majority of the founding fathers agreed with Scripture. And on top of this, you even have quotes out there that say, well, the Bible is the cornerstone for American liberty. You have quotes out there where the founding fathers themselves accredited the Bible for the founding of this country. I mean, the Constitution ties itself to the Declaration of Independence, and the Declaration of Independence mentions God and refers to God more than one time. Even the Constitution uses a lot of Old Testament understanding of law and applied it to the structure of the Constitution. The founders used the Old Testament teachings and implemented it into our forming of our country. So, that's it, guys. That's what my take is on it. Maybe we can do an open hangout on this sometime in the future. So take it easy, guys.